All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to break down some absolutely game-changing negotiation techniques from a guy who learned his stuff where the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. Former FBI lead hostage negotiator Chris Voss. And trust me, what we're about to cover, it's going to completely change the way you think about, well, every conversation you have. Yeah, you read that right. Voss loves to kick things off with a quote like this because it's meant to shock you a little, you know? It's his way of saying, hey, forget everything you think you know about negotiation. Because when the stakes are sky high, that whole let's meet in the middle idea, it just doesn't work. And this is the big idea, really, the core question that flips everything upside down. We're all taught to be logical, right? Bring your facts, make your case. But what Voss figured out is that we're missing the single most important piece of the puzzle. The person on the other side of the table is a human being. And humans, we're emotional, we're irrational. So that means we're throwing out that old school playbook of just, trying to beat someone over the head with facts and logic, and we're replacing it with something much more powerful. It's called tactical empathy, and it is the absolute foundation of everything Chris Voss teaches. Now, it's really important to get this right. Tactical empathy, it's not about being nice. It's not sympathy. You don't have to agree with the other person at all. Think of it as a tool, a strategy. It's about understanding where they're coming from, their feelings, their mindset so deeply that you can actually start to influence their next move. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into the big secret he took from hostage situations. Then, a couple of simple tricks to make people feel heard. We'll talk about the two most powerful words in any negotiation. Then, my favorite part, how to get them to solve your problem. And finally, we'll hit that big idea from the title, why you should never, ever split the difference. So let's start with that big secret. The one thing Voss learned from staring down bank robbers that applies just as much to your boardroom. And it's this. We are not rational creatures. We like to think we are, but we aren't. We make decisions based on emotion. And then we use logic to justify whatever it is we just decided to do. So what does that mean for you? It means your goal right out of the gate isn't to win an argument. It's to build trust. Stop trying to prove you're right with a mountain of facts. Instead, focus on making a connection. Because once they feel like you get them, that's when their defenses drop. And that's when the real conversation can start. Okay, so trust is the goal. Great. But how do you actually do that? Well, it all starts with making the other person feel, and I mean truly feel, like they've been heard. And no, this is not just about being quiet while you wait for your turn to speak. This is a whole other level of listening. And to do it, Voss gives us two techniques that are so simple, you're almost not going to believe they work. They're called mirroring and labeling. And I'm telling you, they're like a superpower. Let's start with mirroring. It's exactly what it sounds like, but even easier. All you do is repeat the last, say, 3 or 4 words the other person just said. That's it. So if they say, I'm just so overwhelmed with this workload, you just say, with this workload? With a slight upward inflection. It sounds crazy, I know, but it works. It makes them feel like you're in sync, and it gets them to keep talking. The next technique is labeling, and this is where you call out the emotion you're hearing. There's this great story in the book about a pharma rep trying to talk to a busy doctor who just kept shutting her down. But she noticed that whenever he mentioned his patients, he got more animated. So she just said, it seems like you're really passionate about your patient's care. And boom, just like that, his whole demeanor changed. The walls came down. All right, so you're doing this. You're mirroring, you're labeling, you're building that connection. But how do you know if it's really landing? Well, according to Voss, there are 2 magic words you're listening for. And when you hear them, you know you've had a breakthrough. And here's the twist. The word you want to hear is not yes. In fact, yes is often totally meaningless. People say yes just to make you go away. The words you are desperate to hear, the ones that signal they truly feel understood, are, that's right. Think about it. When someone says, that's right, what are they really saying? They're saying, wow, you get it. You actually understand my position so well, you just said it back to me. That's the moment the whole dynamic shifts. They're no longer fighting you. Suddenly, you're on the same team, looking at the problem together. It's the ultimate green light. So once you get that that's right, now you can start to guide the conversation. But again, we're not just going to dump a bunch of facts on them. No, we're going to do something much smarter. We're going to get them to solve our problem, and they're going to think it was all their idea. The tool for this, it's called a calibrated question. And these are basically open-ended questions that start with how or what. The genius of these questions is that they give the other person the illusion of control. You're not telling them what to do, you're asking for their help. It instantly turns a potential fight into a brainstorming session. And this right here, this is the holy grail of calibrated questions. The one you need to remember. When someone hits you with a request that is just completely out of line, you don't fight back, you don't say no, you just calmly and respectfully ask, how am I supposed to do that? In your tone is everything. It's got to be genuine curiosity, not an attack. You're saying, please help me understand. Think about your landlord raising the rent by a crazy amount. Instead of yelling, you just look at them and say, I hear you, but how am I supposed to make that work? It completely changes the game. It forces them to look at the problem from your perspective. Okay, so we've built trust, we've gotten them to help us problem solve, and now we're at the final boss, the numbers. This is where the title of the book comes in. Never split the difference. Voss says that just meeting in the middle is lazy. It's a weak move that almost always means somebody, or maybe even everybody, is leaving money on the table. So instead of that, he teaches a system called the Ackerman model. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. First, figure out your real target price, and then you make your first offer way down at about 65% of that. Then you make 3 more offers, but each time you raise the price by a smaller amount. So you might go up by 20%, then 10%, then 5%. This signals you're getting close to your absolute limit. And here's a key trick. Use weird, specific numbers. Not 13,000, but 12,975. It makes it sound like you've done the math and that's your final number. And for the final punch, you throw in something small that isn't cash, just to make them feel like they got a special concession. Okay, so let's just run through that one more time. The foundation is tactical empathy, understanding their emotions. You use simple tools like mirroring and labeling until you get them to say that's right. Once you have that, you use how questions to get them on your side. And at the end, you bargain with a plan. You don't just compromise. And really, the big idea here is that you're negotiating all the time, whether you're buying a car, asking your boss for a raise, or even just deciding with your spouse what to have for dinner. It's all a negotiation. So the only question left is, what are you going to do with these new tools? Your very next conversation, how are you going to guide it?